About 2 years ago, I bought this one, and he's becoming very famous. Hi, I'm Miltonchang of Bonsaiheirloom. First of all, I'd like to do a shout out for Tony, request by John R.B. And he said Tony is a bonsai enthusiast who is terminally ill. So I would say, hi, Tony. In the Chinese custom, and like many religion, we view that life as a journey. You know, when there's life, there's hope. You never know how long you're going to last. And so continue to do your bonsai. So I want to wish you well and in comfort. I want to tell you a story, though. I used to buy plants from a nursery, kind of a small nursery that grows things. This old man, he will gather up cycad seeds, you know, the sago seeds, and plant them. Generally, it takes probably 5 years to 10 years before the plants can be sold. And he's very old, and I said to him, I said, gee, you know, it takes a long time to sell these trees. And you know what he said? So long as I'm alive, I want to be active and do things. And I thought that was a great lesson for me. That's why today, at my age of 82, I'm still starting a bonsai heirloom because I want to keep going. So think about that, okay? And I wish you the very best. And Tony, thank you for being a bonsai hobbyist. And I hope we see you again on the video to share ideas. In fact, write me if you ever feel like you have some ideas to share, and I will publicize it. Thank you, and take care of yourself. Now we're going to go into the Q&A, and the first input was from Sherman. I really appreciate that you add comments to my video because that tells me what you're interested in, what you're concerned with. His comment was on this, my video of digging up the tree from the garden, and he thinks I took off way too much branches. In a sense, I took off way too much. So let me explain what I'm doing or what I did. Basically, my method, think of it this way, is by clipping and then let it grow. So in some sense, it's like in manufacturing, you're subtractive manufacturing. You take a block of metal and you take it off and cut off to shape. In today's modern manufacturing, you actually send them metals and build up the image of the product. And that gives you a lot more flexibility and a lot more versatility. And that's the same thing with me. Then after I clip, I let it grow. And that's the additive process. So I have infinite possibility of a new design because it's adding to whatever I want to. And so I don't mind clipping off a lot because that gives me a clean start, the foundation of my design. And then I build on it. And so, and that's very different from the wiring, which you want a lot of growth, and then you start to pull them different directions. I think that's fine. That's a good method. And you can produce a beautiful bonsai, especially viewed at a distance, beautifully with half day's worth of work. For me, I don't have that kind of patience or time. So it takes me 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 15 minutes to clip it to the basic core design that I wanted. And then I let it grow in a month, then I clip again. And I can probably duplicate anything you can do with a wiring method in a year. So I spend 3 times 15 minutes versus you spend half a day, and we get the same result. And I believe my result will be more natural. I'm not forced to fit into any design that I want. And in today's, one of the videos I will do today is a garden tour of my bonsai court. And what you will find is that every tree is different. Whereas you go to a bonsai book, generally there's a fantastic base, and then the top is a kind of a triangle and lumps of growth. So I think my method gives you a lot more versatility rather than make trees confined to my idea. Rather, I make lemonade when I have lemon to get the shape that the tree wants to be and modify to my desire, versus force the tree to be what I want it to be. So thank you for the input, but I think your method of wiring is good, but my method of cutting back drastically to get to the core of the design, that's also good. And this one from Daniel Forseska, saying the key piece of information is growing the ground for 25 years. Yeah, well, not everyone has the patience or the time to grow a tree for 25 years, but nonetheless, don't cut it too frequently. Let the tree grow so that the trunk will thicken. I think that's the main message. And enjoy, rather than putting in a pot, a bonsai in a pot, a tree in a bonsai pot too early, let it grow. The next one is KJ Bronzo. I like your soil mixture, the sandy loam component that you use. For someone who doesn't have direct access to sandy loam, have a general product that can be brought that is similar. Again, summarizing my idea of watering and the mixture as a system. Remember the the roots wants to be kind of in close contact with soil, and yet it wants some space for the air to reach the root as well. So sandy loam works very well because it drains well, and it's quite fine so that you can make the mix quite dense, in a sense compact, and yet it still drains, especially with a little bit of peat moss. But you can use any garden soil and do the same. And try to mix your own ratio of sandy loam or topsoil, peat moss, and perlite to the way you like it, in a sense. Like, for example, after you plant it, you should press it down, water it, press down, water it, press down, so the soil is somewhat compacted and yet still drains. And that's how the roots get in touch with the soil, the mixed medium, and grow well. The more water you give to the mix, the faster the tree will grow. It will not drown because of the good drainage hole. So in fact, when in doubt, set up a drip system, water it once or twice a day or 3 times a day. You will not overwater, but you will find the trees do tremendously well. And for that matter, if you prefer hand watering, it's a very nurturing, look at it as a very nurturing process, and you'll be happy to do it as a relaxation. So again, in short, builder sand or garden soil can all be good part of the component. I bought a trident maple with some good line curve, but from halfway up, all the branches are heavily scarred from seller's wiring. Would this fully heal or not? Well, you can hope, but I don't think it will ever heal because the mark will always be there. You know, when you have lemon, you make lemonade. And what you do is that you cut off as much as the scarred trunks. And trident maple grows very quickly. It can grow back to where you wanted it. And what I would do actually, oftentimes, I get very impatient. Here's a tree with an interesting curve, and then the branches with the problem that you described. I cut it off and use the base and the curve to start over again. You just set back the tree by maybe 3 years or 2 years, but at the end it will come out exactly right. You have a big base. In the meantime, the fact that you cut off all the branches, you can start to cut off the roots drastically to form this reaching out, the kind of outreaching roots. And the tree at the end, start over again, will become a very nice tree. So have fun. Be bold, it's your tree, and why keep a tree that's mediocre? Rather get rid of mediocrity, and then you have a wonderful tree, outstanding tree. How do I winter my tree when it's minus 40 degrees outside and 3 foot of snow? I don't know, I can't tell you. I went to school in University of Illinois, so it was cold, but I didn't grow any trees there. I think I mentioned in the one video, basically to cover your trees, if it's a very established bonsai, I worry a little bit about freezing over altogether and kill the roots. I will bring it into the garage or put compost on top of it and cover it with some kind of a tarp, leave it on the outside or something like that. But this is not firsthand knowledge. I urge you to talk to your bonsai experts in the field who has experience with dealing with this severe cold weather. May I ask for a video of making aerial roots? You know, I don't have any experience with ficus, which has natural air roots. What I found, I helped a friend to make a work on his ficus. What I found is that in a humid weather, they send out these air roots. That means for absorb moisture in the air. And when these roots hit the ground, they thicken and they become aerial roots. So what I would suggest is that you try that. Don't encourage the aerial roots by spraying liquid water on it or something. Encourage to grow and then cover it with and bury it in the soil. Now I will show in my bonsai tour today a elm tree with the exposed roots, which is almost like aerial roots. And all you have to do is just take a tree with like an elm with a long roots. You just pull it out and gradually wash the soil off, and then gradually you will have the roots exposed. And it's quite attractive. In Chinese and Japanese bonsai, there's a style that's exposed roots. And so you may try that as well too, instead of the aerial roots. But ficus, I think you can definitely encourage the air roots to hit the ground. Can you make a video from one of the big bonsai you have, that you have in the background? Since we're at it, what we'll do is just we go to the bonsai that you talk about, and I would tell you a little bit about the history of that tree, and I think you will enjoy that. So with that, let's go. So this is the metal sculpture you mentioned, as well as the big pine tree, black pine that you mentioned. I showed that last time because it's to show that what arakawa, the bark can become. And these are actually from New Zealand. It was a Chinese immigrant whose grandfather was a vegetable farmer, and he worked hard and sell vegetable on the roadside. And his son became a medical doctor. And then he married a Maori lady, and the son became an artist. And when I visited New Zealand 20 years ago, I fell in love with this. I saw this in the museum, and wound up finding him. I bought it. And about 2 years ago, I bought this one, and he's becoming very famous. He has these big sculptures all over New Zealand in parks and so forth. Now, this tree has some historic value, and I value it a lot. The story is that a young lady by the name of Yamaguchi was living in an internment camp, and the Japanese internment camp. And when she came out, she asked her father back in Japan to send her some seeds, pine seeds. And she started a nursery in Fresno, and that became her livelihood, selling pine trees. And this is actually the only tree that has a curvature because she grows straight up trees for landscaping. And so this tree is about 80 years old, started from a seed, and I just fell in love with it. And I put it in the center of my bonsai court, in the sense of the Zen garden. The tree was about this big then, but since then it has grown to this size, in about 25 years. What happened is it darn nearly died in this Zen garden because it's full of shade. The place is shaded by maple trees. And so I finally decided it was declining, so I finally dug it out. You can see these two branches died off because it didn't get enough sunlight. So the lesson here is that always plant your black pine in full sun. And it rejuvenated about 5 years later, and this is another 5 years later. You can see it's full of growth. And one of these days I would prune this tree to show you how to shape a tree. And one of the things I read about black pine, which a lot of people are interested in that, is how to reduce the needle size. You can see basically what happens is that when the needle grows, they call it the needle. This one comes out, long candle they call it, and then eventually becomes this, and they're side ones. So what I do is I actually don't cut it when the candle is growing because I want the tree to gain strength. Now that it's get to this size, I can now clip all of them at the same time, and the leaves are gonna, the needles are gonna come out about the same length. So in this case, you can see if I cut off this one, if I cut off this, these will grow. And if I cut off, let's see, I can cut off this one, and then I cut off these two will have exactly the same growth rate, and the needles that come out will be much shorter. And so this way I can have a very uniform short needle tree. It will take a long time, but I will do a few examples and then finish the rest and show you what the finished tree looks like. And then 6 months later, I show you what the cut off needle looks like, growth looks like, to give you a first-hand experience how to reduce needle size. I really want to thank the community that I'm building. I think the purpose of my doing this bonsai site is that I feel bonsai is a tremendously healthy hobby. It builds community relationship. How good can that be? How much better can it be? Also, for me personally, I really benefited from practicing bonsai because it was a great relaxation to manage stress when I was managing business. And given today's high problem, big issue about mental health, I think this could also be a partial solution. So I encourage you to take an interest in bonsai and share your experience with others, and click like and all that to improve, to encourage me to keep going.